loud. All right. Hello, everybody.
Hello, welcome to Fate's Wide Wheel. I'm Sam.
I'm Dennis.
And we're here with a decent proposal.
We are not Midnight Run, but a decent proposal. Recording a little bit later than usual this week because we had some stuff going on over this weekend. We were visiting we were visiting family. I know you had some stuff going on, but I am really glad that we waited to record until Monday afternoon.
Yeah, kind of serendipitous, actually, because NBC Universal just announced officially that they've ordered 6 additional episodes of its new drama, Quantum Leap, bringing its season 1 total to 19 episodes. It's funny because as I read this press release from NBC, I just got a notification from Reddit, and somebody on Reddit said season 1 is now 18 episodes. So they didn't take into account the original pilot
for sure. Yeah,
which of course is being repurposed. We've made that mistake ourselves. But no, as confirmed by NBC, it is 19 episodes. Some other interesting information included in the press release is Quantum Leap is the season's #1 new show in the 18 to 49 demographic, which is great. It definitely classifies it, as a hit by any standard for them. Quantum Leap is the #1 NBC current season series on Peacock. And that's awesome. That's exactly what we wanted to see. Again, the conversation I had with the Observer a couple of weeks ago, they were very, reassuring when it came to how important streaming numbers are. And I think that this, to me, the ratings have been fine. They really have been. I don't think there's any reason to naysay the actual television ratings. But to me, I think that this is a sign that Peacock and the viewing on Peacock really kind of helped to steer this decision.
Absolutely.
And not only is it the #1 NBC current season series on Peacock, it's a top 5 title on Peacock season to date across all genres. So that is awesome. People are streaming this on Peacock and they're streaming it a lot, which is great. So if you're out there just leaving it on in the background, good for you. But yeah, this is great news, and super excited about the fact that we're going to get a full order of the first season. I'm feeling confident. I'm feeling good. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling good about it. It was funny. Betsy and I were talking about it this weekend, and we're talking about stuff that we're going to gear up to make the podcast and the website a little bit better. But I said, honestly, I want to wait to see if we get more beyond the 13, before we start investing more time and energy. It's like, okay, is this going to get picked up, or is this going to, what's going to happen? So I'm excited about it.
5 years from now, Dennis is gonna be like, I'm just waiting and seeing if we're gonna get a season 6.
We're gonna get a season. Are we gonna? Is the spinoff? Is that getting picked up? What about the movie?
Right.
What about the movie? What's going on with
they're working on the 3rd film right now, but I need to know if there's gonna be.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of film, speaking of all of that, of course, Deborah Pratt did an AMA over on Reddit, and it was rather illuminating. She didn't answer our question, which is totally fine. Maybe fingers crossed we'll get a chance to ask her again someday. But she did answer some other interesting questions, including stuff about the Evil Leapers, which she certainly seemed to imply that Evil Leapers would be playing a part at some point in the show. There was a question about whether or not Ben would ever leap into one of Sam's previous leaps, or something connected to one of Sam's previous leaps. She seemed to think that would be a pretty great idea. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. So it seems like that is something that may happen. When asked about Sammy Jo, she straight up said, and we had heard her say this before, kind of, secondhand. Someone had asked her a question, and her response was, "Oh, it's going to happen in the movie." And we were just sort of like, "Oh, Deborah, she's great." But she said it again, and this time in a very public forum, about when asked about Sammy Jo, she was like, "Oh, she's going to be in the Quantum Leap movie." Now, whether or not the Quantum Leap movie is something that really happens or not, who knows? Because Deborah's been talking about it for like 20 years now. And we certainly hope it does. And I think that, Deborah's enthusiasm and what she said before about there being kind of a franchise out of Quantum Leap akin to Star Trek or something like that would be lovely. And, who knows, maybe there are already plans for, films on Peacock or et cetera. We'll find out. But yeah, those were kind of the most interesting little pieces that came out of it. And I think that it's encouraging to see so many people involved with the show being active on social media, being active in this way, and getting the opportunity to really interact with the fandom. And I think that, we look at the fandom as being something that's been around for 30 plus years. In a lot of ways, there's so many people that are coming to this brand new. And so the fandom is just growing. And I don't say this in any kind of critical way or in any way to alienate, but it's almost like we've got like two sides of it. You've got, the people that have been around since the original series, and then you've got people that are coming to it now from the new series. And I would love to just see that be one big ball of fandom goodness. But it's really great to see this interactivity from the producers and the cast and the rest of the crew, because I think that for this particular show, for this particular fandom, that type of thing is going to be incredibly important and encouraging as the ball keeps rolling. Now that we've got 19 episodes in our first season.
Absolutely. And I love seeing like the conversations on Twitter and seeing other people like tweet, like people we're not even connected to, but because of likes and other people retweeting, like we're seeing like people like, please don't, NBC, please don't cancel this. Please don't screw this up. Give me more episodes. And like I said, I'm still waiting to see like the younger audience kick in.
Right.
And sure. I'm excited for that.
Yeah. I mean, I think just by virtue of the fact that, that 18 to 49 demo has been so strong, we can take a lot from that to say that it is appealing to a younger audience, which is great, because let's face it, I mean, for the ages like 18 to 22 in particular, you have so many other things that you could be focusing on, many other avenues that you could do it on. And it's great. I think that we're going to get the chance to talk about this show for a while. It's not going to just be 13 weeks and done, which is very nice.
You're up at least 19. Right. And what I'm excited about, we've talked about this before, the thing I'm really excited about with this one season is that we know we're going to get one arc this season, and this one arc this season is all about where is Ben going? What is this thing that he is trying to get to? And I'm super excited to find out. But we got this week's episode, but first we got to thank some patrons. We got to we got to spank. No, we're not going to do that. No, we're going to do that. You got to pay. You got to pay a lot more for that. No. Let's thank some patrons and donors here. We got Owl's Place, Leap Fan Site, Cosplay Dad, Joanne Bartlett, Dana Bias, Rich Bork, Kevin Butcher, Dermot Devlin, friend of the podcast for a while. Thank you, Dermot, for becoming a patron. Barry Donovan, Brian Dreadful, Troy Evers, Larry Gainey, Jason Geis, Michelle Hoffman. She is also new. Welcome. Thank you so much, Michelle. She is totally on board for us having a Orville spinoff podcast, by the way. Amy Holtkamp, Bess A. Corey, Oddly Specific with Audra, Christopher Redmond, Adrian Saul, Karen Saxon, Mike Stouffer, Damon Sugamelli, Larry Trujillo, Jill Wilson, and also our anonymous donors. Thank you so much. If you would like to become a patron monthly, you can do so through patreon.com/fateswidewheel. One time you can go through buyusacoffee.com/fateswidewheel. That information is in the show notes. You can also send us an email. Someone sent us a Facebook message this week saying they couldn't find our email address because for the last few episodes, I've left our email address off of the show notes. So sorry about that. If you want to send us an email with feedback, comments on previous episodes, you can send us an email at fateswidewheelpodcast@gmail.com, because believe it or not, someone already got fateswidewheel@gmail.com. I want to see what they're doing with that email. What are they doing? I should send them an email. Just say, hey, right. Just say, hey, what's going on?
What's up, guys?
Yeah. So thank you all so much. Looking forward to seeing a lot of you at the watch party. One of the things that we do every week with our patrons and donors is that we have a watch party on Zoom that starts about a half hour before the episode starts airing. We chat throughout. We keep it silent. We do it all through the Zoom chat, so nobody is talking during the episode. And then we have about, what I say is about 10 minutes, but the last couple of weeks, like it's gone on like 20 minutes, a half hour, where we just end up chatting with each other about what we thought of the episode. And last week was a doozy with the reveal of the hand link at the end. A lot of people pointed out, a lot of people pointed out, I missed it too, is that there were some strains of the old home theme over the hand link last week that I missed, and I need to go back. I need to go back and rewatch.
Yeah, it was nice to hear that motif and pop up again. It was different, and it did take me a second watch to catch it. I didn't catch it on the first watch, but then on the rewatch I did catch it. Yeah, I mean, I almost feel like we could devote another episode just to talking about last week's, quite frankly, because so much happened,
Oh, sure.
and it was so good.
Mhm.
But I think we were able to, to cover it as best we could.
Pretty well. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and I think a decent proposal. It's interesting because you hit it, and I was getting to ready to respond, but you did it, I think before I had a chance to, and you
Mhm.
hit it right on the head when you said that tonally this is a very different episode. A decent proposal is very different from somebody up there like Sven, but when you look at the quality of it, like it's just as good. I mean, this is
Mhm.
another great episode, and who knows what's going to happen over the next 3 or 4 episodes and whatnot, but it does feel as though they've figured it out, they've hit their stride, and I think we're in for a real treat for the rest of the season, if these 2 episodes kind of back to back are any indication of what we can expect, going forward. And I think there's a great division between, the project, the modern day stuff, and the leap. I think that the other thing that they really hit on, we'll talk a little bit more about this in the spoiler version, because I guess I'm giving you my non-spoiler review right now,
Sure.
basically. But one thing that I think that they really hit on, and I was in conversation with someone involved in the show actually about this, is that by casting somebody like Justin Hartley specifically, they've got someone who's very charismatic, who's very capable, and right off the bat, it's easy to get invested with him. And this
Sure.
is no shade thrown at any of the other guest actors that they've had thus far. You know, the I think the type of charisma and what Justin brings to the role and what he brings to the screen that's just not something that everybody has, quite frankly. And I think that if you're going to have to split your time between a leap and modern day, all that sort of stuff, that what better way to get the audience invested in your characters than by having actors that we might be a little familiar with, that just bring that charisma, that have a role that feels like fits them like a glove, because the role also feels like it fits him very well. And it really heightened my enjoyment of the episode. And I'm familiar with him, a bit obviously from Smallville, but
Mhm.
yeah, I thought it was a great piece of casting, and I thought that it really really helped my overall investment of the leap. As a whole, and I felt like that the leap got some time to breathe and had some interesting moments in it. And I mean, Raymond Lee just continues to just be phenomenal.
Mhm.
I mean, just phenomenal.
Girlfriend.
Yeah, and
That was one
and
of my
and and
favorite lines.
and Addison, oh my gosh, we'll talk more about it in the spoiler, but like
Mhm.
Addison is fabulous in this episode as well.
Oh, yeah.
And that's not even to talk about the wonderful work that Mason Alexander Park does once again, and that Ernie Hudson does as well. So I just think it's a really, really strong episode across the board. And back against the wall, if you had to get me to like pick my favorite episode of the season, I might lean in towards 3, but man, it would be tough, because I think 4 is just as good, and
Mhm.
in some ways perhaps even more momentous, quite frankly.
Mhm. I agree. I agree with everything you said about Justin Hartley. It's not just, I mean, not to take away from Justin, because he is obviously great. I will say this is the first thing I've seen him in. I watched a little bit of Smallville, but not what he was involved in. This Is Us. I want to watch it, but I know as soon as I start, I'm going to binge it and it's going to
Yeah,
emotionally devastate me.
yeah,
So I haven't gotten into it. It's not just him, but it's also like what they gave his character, because very often, and I'm just realizing this, like thinking about it, a lot of the characters who have agency in Quantum Leap episodes outside of our main characters are usually the villains.
yeah, totally, yep.
But like right off the bat in this first scene, you have Justin's character like taking charge. And the best episodes of Quantum Leap we've talked about before are the ones, or almost, where you could take Sam and Al, or in this case, Ben and Addison, you could take them out of the story, rewrite the
Yeah,
script a little bit, and it could just be like a standalone anthology story, which is what Don
totally.
Belisario set off at. And 5 minutes into watching this, I was like, oh, like, yeah, this could be its own standalone story. We could
Yeah,
watch Justin's character. I can't think of his name right off the top of my head. Like Justin's character.
Jake.
Yeah, of course it was Jake. I was waiting for a Just Jake reference. Uh, Calling back to MIA. I could just see Jake and Eva, bounty hunters, do
Right,
a story. I mean, I don't know if it'd be,
yeah.
for an entire series, but I can see them do the story. I
uh
love, oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I know, I completely agree. I think it's a really great point. And that's honestly, I felt the same way about last week's episode as well. I felt like I could have watched a story, about Daryl and you know what I mean? Like that would have been just as entertaining. So yeah, I think that's a great point.
Yeah, I love that his first leap into a woman, it's treated, aside from like the opening gag of him getting harassed to the point that he ends up like throwing a drink in the guy's face, and Addison's commentary on
Yeah.
it. His leaping into a woman is treated just like Sam's leaps into a woman after What Price Gloria.
Yes.
There are comments, but there are some subtle comments like here and there. Then after that, it's just very matter of fact. I love that there was no like big deal made about it. Ben was like, "Oh my God, what's going on?" Addison, nobody else at the project, nobody questioned at all that he had leaped into a woman. It's like, "Oh, yep, this happens. Here we go into the story."
Right. Yeah.
And I love that I think with these last two episodes, they're really finding the balance between leap story and project story. This episode, I think we've spent the least amount of time at the project than we have in all of the previous episodes. I love the scene between Magic and Ian, and it's been teased for a while, so we know pretty much what the scene is about.
Right.
Very well acted, very well done. I have so many questions and so many thoughts about the actual meat of what Magic says. I can't wait till we dive into that part, because I want to have a conversation with the writers, not as writers and podcasters, just as all fans of the show, as we all are. And I just want to pick their brain, like them not having to be secretive or whatever, and just ask them like, what is the process in the room when you're deciding all of this stuff? Because I know one person probably wrote Magic's monologue, but there were a lot of voices in there like, we have to word it this way because it's going to mean a certain thing here, everything, so on and so on. So yes, all of that.
Yeah.
Overall, it was a great episode, and I don't know what else to say without just like diving in, talking about spoilers.
Well, then let's do it. Before we get started, something that we haven't necessarily been doing quite as officially, if you will, as we were doing with the original series overview, is talking about the directors and the writers. And part of that has just been because some of that information has come to us, kind of late. Like we've had the benefit of hindsight when it comes to obviously the original series.
Somebody was talking on Twitter and Facebook about it. IMDb so far with this series is a hot mess.
Oh yeah.
As far as having specific information on individual episodes.
Yeah. So for this episode, the writer was Moira Kurland, and she has a number of writing and producing credits under her belt over the past couple of decades, including Dark Angel, Castle, Arrow. Has written numerous episodes of television as well. This is her first Quantum Leap episode, and I thought it was just did a phenomenal job. Of course, we know that with the writers room and with hands-on producers that it is a bit of a collaborative process in a lot of ways, but it's her name on the credits. So I think she did a phenomenal job. And then our director is Rachel Talalay, and if you know anything about Rachel at all, you know that she's a more than capable director. She's directed numerous episodes, some of my favorite episodes, quite frankly, of Doctor Who ever, including the season finales, for the 12th Doctor, Peter Capaldi. Just some incredible stuff. Hellbent, Heaven Sent, World Enough in Time, The Doctor Falls, Death in Heaven, Dark Water, Twice Upon a Time, and she's also directing the upcoming 60th anniversary special. So that's all the endorsement I needed when it came to her work, as I think she's just a phenomenal director when it comes to that. But she's also directed a number of other programs, genre programs as well, including like The Flash, Superman and Lois. She's worked on Riverdale. Just a great career. And shout out, because it's that time of year. Her first directing credit, believe it or not, is a film called Freddy's Dead: The Final Nightmare. So happy Halloween, everyone. But yeah, I thought the direction in this episode was fantastic. It felt very cinematic. Like there were times when this episode, it really, I mean, yes, if there is something that is going to take some getting used to, I think for some folks, myself included, frankly, is there's a lot of Hollywood backlot stuff, and it's been so long, to be completely frank, it's been so long since I was regularly watching network television that I kind of had gotten away from the backlot stuff, because so much of the prestige stuff is shot on location, right?
Oh, sure.
So, or if I'm watching like a sitcom, like I expect it to look a certain way or whatever. But sometimes, when watching this, it's sort of like, all right, we're in back. That's fine. That's fine. It's fine. It's just your suspension of disbelief. It's no big deal. That said, this episode felt very cinematic. It felt like something that, in some ways, was just I don't want to say a step above, because obviously Atlantis had a lot of really amazing shots as well, especially considering the special effects and stuff. So, but I think it's wonderfully shot. It's a beautiful episode, well directed, well constructed overall.
Absolutely. And speaking of backlots, because I had the same thought, I think they even used the same alley from the pilot
Yeah, I would wager that is absolutely the
at
case.
at one point.
It,
But
it's funny
but
because
that's
I would.
okay. Go back and watch the original series. There's a lot of backlot shots. And if you're just new, you go back and you listen to our old stuff. I love calling out like when I can pick out like when they use the old sets from episode to episode. So absolutely.
Yeah, one of the things I was going to say is I've been reading a book about the production of Star Trek, and talking about like the initial like production meetings and design meetings, and getting everything together, and how at first, of course, one of the big hurdles was like, how can you make a show set in space, going to a different planet every week, blah, blah, all this sort of stuff. And the mandate kind of came down to say like, well, every planet we visit is going to be a class M planet. It can sustain life kind of like our own. And we've got these big cycloramas. Well, some planets will be purple, some will be red, some will be orange, and they reused so much of the same
Sure.
stuff over and over and over again. And you just have to get creative with it. And I think, again, part of it also is, it's like, look, if you're telling me a good story, I don't really care. How many pieces of theater have we seen in a black box with like no set whatsoever, but it's been absolutely riveting because it's high quality stuff. And I think it's the same thing with this. It's just sort of like, look, if I recognize the same backlot from the premiere that's in this episode, who cares, because they're telling me a great story. And I say that partly because I've seen some comments, some of the naysayers out there that have talked about little things like that and production quality and stuff. First of all, I think they're wrong. I think the production quality is very high. I just think that, again, it's that's you're dealing with network television. Like, you're going to use what you have, and
Sure.
you've got these backlots, so of course you're going to use them, you're going to redress them. And sometimes you might notice that, like, hey, wait a minute, and sometimes maybe there's an errant palm tree in the background when there shouldn't be. It happens.
Absolutely. And yeah, so thoughts about that. I'm at the point now, especially now that we know that like the series has been picked up for 6 more episodes. We're going to get a 19 episode season, and just how good the last 2 episodes have been. I don't have time for the naysayers anymore. Like, none.
Same here.
None.
Yep.
Out of here. You're gone. You're done. Even fans of the series who are hard on the first couple of episodes, I'm kind of miffed at you, because I'm like, just give them a chance, find their footing, trust them, and for sure. And the backlot thing, me, like for you and me, like with theater backgrounds, there's almost like a theatrical quality to it, of just like, okay, what you're seeing is a set, like you said, like the black box that you see stuff in. It's like, you kind of see the cracks and everything, but you accept it. But still, yeah, the riveting story overall.
Yeah, and I think that the leap in, finding out kind of right away that obviously Ben is leapt into a woman. We see the mirror image shot, which is great. We get information almost immediately about that they're bounty hunters, they're looking for somebody. It turns out that the guy that was hitting on Ben is indeed the person that they were looking for. Meanwhile, we have Addison popping in, and she's having a ball with the fact that Ben has leapt into a woman, which is great. We really, I think, in the first maybe quarter of this episode, I feel like we see kind of a different side of Addison, which is really, really nice. It's almost as if in the last episode, she has kind of that break. She's exhausted. She's just feeling, so tightly wound. She learns that this is going to be a while, right? That they're in this for a while. And then they have this moment of coming together where they're all, together as friends. And of course, they find out that, bad news, Janice has hand link. But other than that, it feels it feels a little bit like some of the weight has been lifted off of her shoulders, and that
Mhm.
tracks, I think, with where we left things last episode. And it feels nice because it gives us a little bit of a different side of Addison.
Absolutely. And I want to point this out, and I know this is not a nitpick or anything, but I find it interesting. It's always a thing of like the project time and lead time, they kind of go back and forth, they track with each other, but Addison is there quick. Like she's there in 30 seconds. She is on
Hmm.
top of it. And of course
Yeah.
it fits the story. But I just have to point out, it's like, sometimes that's a little
Right.
bit off, but that's always the thing of the series.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I did today is I rewatched a bit of Leap Home Part 2 because we had a question in
Because
reference to Magic's monologue. Yeah. And
sure.
as I was rewatching it, it was just sort of like, man, Al takes a long time to show up in that episode. And it's the
Mhm.
same with Leap
Yep.
Home Part 1. He takes a long time to show up. And that's, I mean, that could be said of a number of episodes in the original series. But there are episodes where, yeah, where he's there, pretty soon after Sam leaps in. So this was interesting because I think that this is probably the quickest that we see Addison get to Ben.
Sure.
Which I think again provides us with some of those comedic moments, um, which is nice. And
Mhm.
I mean, I'm enjoying the sense of humor of the show quite a bit.
Oh
I
yeah.
mentioned this on Twitter this past week, and I really think that it feels much more natural. I think that they've crafted a living and breathing world so that those moments of levity, rather than feeling like set up punchline, it just feels like I'm deriving humor from the interactions between human
Absolutely.
beings, which is
Absolutely.
nice.
I spent like the in this first scene in the exchange with Addison and Ben, she had a line. So I was trying to interpret it like he's like, I'm getting used to like feeling clothes in places I'm not used to feeling clothes. And then she has a line like,
Yeah.
or what you're not feeling. How did you interpret that line? Did you interpret that line the way I interpreted that line?
Oh, I interpreted that line the way you interpreted that line. Yeah.
Okay, all right, all right. Because I was
Nothing
like,
doing down there.
okay, yeah. In a different episode in a fanfic, they can explore what's going on with Ben down there. Of course, like they never did that with Sam when he leaped into a woman. Anyway,
Right,
moving on,
right, right.
moving on. The humor from it, I love when Ben punches out the guy out in the parking lot, and Jake is like, "Have you been boxing out the side?" And Ben's like, "Actually, yeah."
Yeah.
I,
That was
that line brought me
nice.
so much joy.
Yeah, I agree.
Now, now here's the thing I want to ask you, because I realized something that they did specifically in Atlantis, and they have not done in every other episode. I was visiting family this weekend, and while food was on the grill, like we were ready for it to get ready, one program went off. I found out that they have Hulu, and I was like, "Oh, I know what we're watching." Pulled up Quantum Leap. We got all the way through the first episode. Apparently, my brother-in-law, he's been watching it. He didn't tell me about it.
Oh, nice.
My brother-in-law has been watching it. He'd seen the last two episodes, but he had not seen the very first episode. My sister hadn't seen the first episode at all. She got all wrapped up into it to the point, like at one point, like she got up to leave the room. She was like, "Pause this." So she was really
Nice.
into the story. But I realized watching the beginning of Atlantis yesterday, as the shuttle is lifting off, they throw the year up onto the screen, and they have not
Yes.
done that in every other episode. And I found
Great
myself
point.
thinking about it this morning. Is that just one thing that they tried in one episode and they decided, okay, that's not a thing that we're going to do? Or do you think that they specifically did that for Atlantis to make it as explicit as possible that this was not the Challenger?
That is a wonderful point, and I had not thought of that. I think that could very well be, yeah, that they wanted to distance themselves as far as they could from it being the Challenger or the Columbia, or you know what I mean. That this was a different time, to say the least. But it could also be that it was experimentation. I mean, obviously, the
Mhm.
classic series would always list the month, day, and year, as well as the title of the episode, and that's
Sure.
something that they've strayed away from, which is fine. Um, Man, that's
Because
something to
it
file away into our banks, and if we get the chance to ask,
I
somebody
know,
someday.
because it came up because someone else in my family, like as the shuttle was lifting off and the year popped up on the screen, they made some comments like, "Oh, I thought it was the Challenger for a second." But the
Mhm.
1998 affirmed that it wasn't. I was like, "Oh, that's interesting." Speaking of dates and putting stuff on the screen, this episode, I didn't catch it the first time, but I got a chance to watch it twice. they never explicitly say the date in the episode at all.
You know,
it's all derived from Princess Diana getting married.
Yeah, the context clues. I love that. It reminded me of one of the earliest examples of this, I believe, was Double Identity. Or no, not Double Identity, excuse me. Why did I say Double Identity when I clearly meant Play It Again Seymour? In Play It Again Seymour, we find out what the date is and what year it is from the context clues before we ever hear anything. Yeah, which I always really liked. I thought that was kind of neat. I liked this too. The thing that I liked about it as well is that it felt like something that we as podcasters, etc., were able to kind of derive just from seeing the production photos, because we saw the newspaper that one of the characters is holding, and of course on the very front cover is the front page is the news of Princess Diana and Prince Charles getting married. So I thought that was cool, but I don't know that I had consciously noticed the fact that it had been it hadn't been stated at all.
I don't even think they said the year. Because I think at one point Jen had a line about Ben being in the 80s and kind of summing up things for Ian at one point, but I don't even think they said the year at any point. Leap Story or Project Story. No more commentary beyond that. I just found that.
That is kind of interesting. Yeah. Of course, I think kind of moving the plot along real quick is that we get to the bounty hunting office, which we find out, of course, that Eva's dad owns the bail bonds, the bail bonds, and they show up, and Jake is just sort of like, oh, lights are on, the door's ajar, oh, something's amiss, and he goes in to kind of check it out, and of course Ben is like, oh, I better go, better go see what's going on, and so Ben walks in, of course, Jake gets down to propose, and it's again, it's a wonderful moment, not only for for Justin and Raymond, but I think that Caitlin as Addison is just really enjoying this episode, and I really enjoyed Addison's reactions to the proposal.
Absolutely, yeah, and I don't know if I have and I don't want to like cherry pick like the moments throughout, because there were so many great moments of little comedy throughout. Yes, I actually have picked up boxing. The stank that Ben puts on girlfriend later on in the episode, just like the humor that they find throughout, I think is both between writing and what Raymond and Caitlin are doing, and Justin this episode for that matter, because like I said, never see Justin in anything else, but he's got the star power. He is perfectly at home in this episode, probably more so than any guest actor that we have had so far, at least from a comedic sense.
Yes.
And from this well-worn, you could see this character, like I said, in their own TV show.
Oh yeah, if somebody told me that that there was going to be a show about Jake or whatever, this is a backdoor pilot, you know what I mean? If it's 30 years ago and they're doing a backdoor pilot for a show, I would be like, oh yeah, that makes sense, because he inhabits the role so well.
Quantum Leap. I hope they don't do this. Please don't do this, NBC. Don't let us give you ideas. You're not listening, NBC. I know you're not listening, but please don't let us give you ideas. Don't turn Quantum Leap into a backdoor pilot machine. Because they totally could,
but they could. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and one of the things that I love in particular about the role of Jake, and this to me is wholly with the writing. I mean, you have an actor who's up to the task, don't get me wrong, but is that they've created a character that actually gets some stuff to do beyond
agency.
I love kind of the angst over the fact that Eva doesn't say, yes, I'll marry you, Ben, rather. And the rest of the episode, there's this real struggle that the character is having, and you can see that inner struggle, and it's so well defined. And I just really enjoyed the fact that we had this well-drawn character to attach ourselves to over the course of the leap. And I agree with what you said too about the level of agency. And the amazing thing about this episode is that you have these characters, both Jake and Tammy Jean, who we'll talk about here in a second, that I feel like they both have so much agency, and they both are doing so much that while I hesitate to say this in some ways because I don't want people to get the wrong idea. Like you said, you could just take Ben out of the episode and still have a great story.
Yeah.
But the wonderful thing is, and this to me is just the hallmark of great writing and people getting Quantum Leap, is that it is absolutely necessary for Ben to be there. Ben impacts this leap. Again, Ben happens to the leap doesn't happen to him. And yet we're shown incredibly capable, well-rounded characters around him. Whereas in last week's episode, I felt like Daryl needed Ben to be there. Like without Ben there, like Daryl dies. Like Daryl's an amazing character. John Chaffin was fantastic in the role, but this one's just a little bit different. And I enjoyed that. I enjoyed that setup.
What I found interesting about this particular episode is they don't have to keep chasing Tammy Jean, but
No, they don't.
but Addison keeps pretty like, no, this is the thing that you have to do, that you have to leave. And my one gripe I would have between this episode and the last episode is they've kind of glossed over this whole, no, you have to do this to leap or you're stuck here forever. Like it was just announced like as a hard given in last week's episode. And I just wanted like one or two more lines, like explaining to Ben. I want Ben to question that.
Right.
If that makes sense. You know what I mean? It's just like accepted as a given. No, if you don't do this thing, you're not going to leave. So like it sticks out in this particular episode. They don't have to keep doing the thing, but because Ben has the leap, they have to keep putting themselves back into harm's way to get Tammy Jean. And like I said, because of what they know about her, what they don't know about her, like it's not immediately clear why it's essential.
That's a really good point. And I wonder, just because they've addressed so many little things as we've gone along, if that's something that they won't address in a future episode. Like if there won't be more emphasis placed on the fact that, like, yes, you have to set right something that once went wrong in order to leap. And if you don't, you will be stuck here forever. And and go just a little bit more into it. Because like you said, it's established, but it feels maybe just a tad bit nebulous compared to what we certainly as longtime fans have come to expect from the show. So I wonder if there would, and part of the reason why I say maybe it will be addressed in the future and almost excuse the fact that it hasn't necessarily been addressed yet, is because it's still kind of fresh information for them that Ben's not just going to come back home, Sure. So maybe there's, and plus they're dealing with all the Janice stuff as well. So maybe there's this notion of that they just haven't thought about it too much, right? That the characters themselves are in a place where it's kind of like, we're not having this conversation yet for a number of reasons because we got to get to all this other stuff. But I would agree with you that this episode probably would have been a perfect time to have a little bit of that conversation, right? Because of the circumstances under which like you say, Jake's done. Like Jake, as far as he's concerned, is like, I don't need to do
exactly
this, and it's Ben's prodding that keeps him after Tammy Jean, because they think that they have to save her.
Yeah, right. I will ask you, I went in totally clueless on this. Was there any point before the reveal that you knew that Tammy Jean was the big bad?
Nope, no clue whatsoever, because wisely, similarly to the production photos for last week, that where they yanked the photos of Janice standing over Beth, they didn't put any production photos that would have alluded to that fact at all. They did put some production photos up that pretty much guaranteed something that I hinted at last episode that I said I wasn't going to talk about, that we will talk about when we get to the end of this episode.
Sure.
But there was no, I honestly did not think about that at all. Did you?
No, did not cross my mind. I got there, I was like, oh yeah, that totally makes sense.
But it worked. It got me, and I'm sure that there are people out there that were just suspicious, from the get-go or whatever, were like, yeah, she's a bad guy or whatever. But I didn't get it.
I will say I was surprised. I don't think we have gotten such an explicitly violent death in Quantum Leap before. Of the gunshot to the chest.
Right.
Like we've gotten, the guys blown away by Sam at the end of MIA. The soldiers blown away in Leap Home Part 2, which we'll get to here in a little bit, but not like explicitly one shot to the chest, blood pack.
Yeah.
Keel over. Kind of took, I wasn't put off by it, but kind of took me by surprise.
It did, yeah, because we didn't see a lot of blood in the original series. Mm-hmm. Like most of the gunshot wounds and stuff like that we saw were, it was just kind of like, basically what we saw was gunpowder. We just saw
Sure.
gunpowder and smoke, and that was it.
Mhm.
Yeah, that is interesting. Here's another little tidbit. Here's something for you that I was not aware of, because I'm not big on the celebrity gossip, and like I said, I haven't really paid attention to much network television. Did you know that Justin Hartley and Sophia Pernis are a couple in real life?
Yes. This is the thing why I cannot figure out why I knew Justin Hartley's name. And I'm so glad that you brought this up, because I was looking up information to confirm, because I had heard that. I was like, oh, when did he marry her? Oh, he married her in 2001. He divorced Chriselle Staus in 2001. And I went to college with Chriselle Staus.
No. Oh my
Yes.
gosh.
So if you know
Wow.
Chriselle Staus, she is now on Netflix's Selling Sunset.
Okay.
Before that, you probably know her more from her soap opera stint. She started off on All My Children, and then I think General Hospital after All My Children folded. Yes, went to college with her. I was in at least one show with her. The one
Yeah.
show I remember very specifically because she was basically the heroine and I was the villain. Alan Ayckbourn's, I think, that's playwright's name, Communicating Doors, a
Mm,
British farce, which, by the way, is another time travel story. I got to die twice, which you could do in a time travel story.
right.
But yes, that's how I'd see Justin Hartley's name before, because they do follow Chriselle on social media, like very loosely. Like I follow her Facebook page,
Yeah.
and then as soon as like, oh, that's where I've seen Justin's name before.
Wow.
So
Wow.
yeah, so it makes,
Yeah.
had they stayed married, would it have been Chriselle Staus that we would have seen in this episode? I don't know. Or did
I don't know.
or was it the other way around? Did Sophia get him the part in this episode? I don't know. I don't know. Anyway, celebrity gossip part over. That is
Yes,
not our
exactly.
podcast. That is not our
Uh,
podcast. But
but Sophia
yes,
is Tammy Jean. I just
yeah,
wanted to use I wanted to use the kind of segue into quickly that I think that Sophia does a wonderful job as Tammy Jean. I think that Tammy Jean ends up being a really interesting character, and certainly, towards the end turns into kind of your heavy mustache twirling villain a bit. But because that's not all we see from her, it didn't bother me at all. Like I did.
sure.
This is not in any way like the villain from the premiere episode, who was, kind of just mustache twirling villain the whole way through.
Oh God, Tammy Jean would shoot that guy in the chest and just like,
Oh,
you know who that guy was in the pilot? He was Store Brand Sawyer.
yes.
He
Yeah.
looked in the face, he looked a lot like Sawyer from Lost. I was like, is that no? Oh, dude. Anyway, can we
Uh,
can we dive into Magic and Ian scene?
yes. So before we get there real quick, let's just say that there's one more big reveal that we want to talk about with the leap. But overall, I think that kind of covers, most of our like spoilery feelings about the leap itself. The back at the project, we don't get a ton of time back at the project, but we do get, I think, probably thus far, one of the most important scenes, present day scenes, and arguably one of the most important scenes, period, thus far in our revival series. Have at it, Dennis.
So the impetus, what gets us to the scene is that they find out that Janice is hacking into Ziggy to find out what the project is going to do, which I find really interesting, for one. But so yeah, this brings up the fact that they're pulling up personnel files. So Magic's like, all right, Ian, before you see this, I want to tell you this, something you want to know in person. Of course, I love Mason Alexander Park, like playing the fear, like, oh, we're gonna go for a walk, like what's gonna happen? Like, I'm
Right.
fired,
Yeah.
I love Ian's energy that
they go get coffee, they go outside. Yeah.
I love Ian's energy that they constantly feel like they're on the verge of getting fired. You know what I mean? It
Right,
just
right,
feels
right,
like
right.
it just, or
Takes me
they're
back to
gonna
the
get,
mushrooms moment in the premiere episode. Like,
yeah,
not that I
they're
would
gonna get
ever
taken
do
out.
mushrooms.
They're gonna disappear into the back of a van. So they go out and they have this scene, and then so many questions about this. I don't even know where to start. So, and I think I texted you about this, the nudge and
Yeah.
what that means. Someone on Twitter, one of our followers, Matthew, and I don't want to pull it up. I meant to pull it up before. Apologies, Matthew, if you're listening to this episode. Matthew, one of our new followers on Twitter, he pointed out that the whole idea of purposefully leaping into someone and taking their place kind of violates consent as we know it
Absolutely. Sure.
now. And this kind of suggests that in some weird way, Sam asked permission before he leaped into people. because that's how I took it. Like I felt a nudge, and I chose to let this presence in.
Yeah.
Which begs the question, like, I felt a nudge. What if magic had pushed back and pushed him away?
Right.
Would Sam have leaped into someone else into the squad?
I think that I wonder if I know that there's been some talk about the whole safety protocols thing, and maybe we should talk a little bit about that later, and the fact that Ben can leap outside of his own lifetime and everything. Sure. But let's wipe that out. Let's go back to the original series for a moment. String theory, ball string, one ends your life, one ends your death, loop it together, ball it up, all the days touch one another, etc. I took it more to mean that when Sam leaps, it's not a straight line. It's not that he's going from this person to, he didn't leap from himself at 16 into magic in Vietnam right away. That, as we know, that leaps sometimes take time. That some leaps can sometimes take like a week or two before he lands. And I kind of took it to mean not so much that Sam's asking permission explicitly, but that in that bouncing around, that maybe sometimes he's nudging someone, so to speak, and they nudge back. And so he bounces off somewhere else. Now, I would probably argue that with the conceit of Leap Home Part 1 and Part 2, that yes, he was on a trajectory. I would even take it further back than that. I would say MIA. From the time he lands in MIA, he sets off kind of a chain of events that takes him to himself when he's 16, and then takes himself to Vietnam. And I think part of it's to teach him a lesson. And this is stuff that I'm adding in. I think it's to teach him a lesson from the end of MIA, that he thinks he's making the rules, right? That Sam thinks that he's got rules that he has to follow, so he can't break those rules and put Al and Beth together. And then I think, Time Fate or whatever is like, oh, really? Well, here you go, Sam Beckett. And then throws him back home, and then throws him into Vietnam to show him that, like, not only can you change those things, I want you to change those things, because, I want you to benefit from this too. So anyway, that's all kind of headcanon-y bullshit, but I think that, I think it's an interesting conceit that yes, that there is kind of a transaction almost taking place, that there's like, I'm tapping you on the shoulder, step aside. It's like an improv scene, right? And where yell freeze, you jump up, you tap somebody on the shoulder, you jump in. And so I thought it was interesting. I didn't take it necessarily quite like that, though. I took it to just mean that magic felt kind of this metaphysical, like, he was being pushed aside for a moment, and then didn't really remember much about what happened in the time that he was gone, and the next thing you knew, he was back. That's kind of just, I just kind of took it at face value.
That's interesting. And let's talk about the fact that he blacks out.
Yep.
And then he comes to a day later. Now, granted, we're just hearing one side, and they could uncover more later as the series goes on. But it really feels like they're retconning out the waiting room at all. Because when he said that after he got back, he started having vivid dreams about someone, before he said Sam, well, actually, it's interesting. He never actually said Sam. Ian says Sam. Yeah. Before Ian says Sam, I really thought he was going to say he had vivid dreams about Al.
Al, yeah.
Conversations with Al in the waiting room. But no, like, they really heavily implied that he had vivid dreams of Sam. Also found it interesting. They made a point to not show Scott Bakula at all in the flashback scenes. And I don't, if that's was just a creative choice or a technical choice.
I think I'm on the side that it was a creative choice, that the idea behind it was that this was not about Sam's experience. This was about magic experience. And I feel like had you shown Sam, had you shown Scott Bakula at any point, that would have honestly taken a little bit away from that. I know some people might disagree and have totally valid reasons for doing so. But for me personally, I think that, I think it would have become more about that Easter egg of seeing Scott's face and seeing Sam as magic. Plus it makes sense, right? Like, why would magic be having these memories or whatever of Sam? So, but yes, I think you raise a good point too.
I guess I found it weird. Like, they make such a big deal. Like, I had these vivid dreams of a man I'd never seen before, and then no point did they actually like show Sam. That stuck out as a little bit weird. So beyond those 2 points, then the reveal that it was basically magic that restarted the project back up.
Yeah, I thought that this was interesting, and I thought it was interesting because one of the things that that I had been speculating is that Al had brought magic along at some point.
Mhm.
That Al had maybe started to kind of like try to form a bit of a group of people that he knew he could trust, that would be invested in the project, maybe for different reasons, but at least in a similar way that he was, because he knew he wasn't going to be able to do it forever, and he knew that at some point he'd have to pass the torch. And so I it'll be interesting. Part of me wonders, is it a missed opportunity? And make no mistake, I thought Magic's monologue was great. I thought Ernie was fantastic. I thought
Oh,
Mason was
yes,
fantastic.
absolutely, yeah.
This is not about that. This is just me like questioning a creative choice and saying like, I think maybe personally, I would have preferred there to be a relationship between Magic and Al. And it seems
Mhm,
as though there wasn't as much of a relationship between Magic and Al,
mhm,
although it's hinted at enough when he talks to Beth that there
mhm.
had to have been some sort of relationship between the two of them. Um,
Sure.
so I don't know.
I don't know, it begs the question, like, did at any point did Magic tell Al about his experience
Right.
and why he restarted the project? Or in my headcanon is going wild here, or is it more, did Al become such a sad person after they lost Sam, like Magic felt like it would be hurtful in some way to share that information with him?
Could be. It's
I don't know.
interesting to me to think that, once Magic hit Admiral and got like all this top secret clearance or whatever, he was able to just go get this information on his own.
For
Because
sure.
for me, like I would think that Project Quantum Leap would be like one of those things that's so classified that even like, you know,
Sure. Yeah.
they wouldn't have told Donald Trump about Project Quantum Leap. Let's just
Oh
put it
God.
that way.
Oh God. No.
I can't believe I had to say his fucking name on this podcast. I hadn't said his name in a long time either.
No.
Anyway,
Yeah.
yeah. So I thought that was kind of interesting too. But again, I mean, it moves the story along, and I think overall, just for the character to learn more about Magic in this respect is important. We kind of get the confirmation that which had basically been confirmed in Leap Home Part 2, but we get the confirmation that he, like, when he came on to Tom's SEAL team in 1970, like that's when he started. So it's very likely that he was like 18, 19 years old. So
Sure.
at this point he's like 71, 72, which tracks with Ernie's age and
Yeah.
everything as well.
Now, this is the question that I asked you when I texted you before we
Yeah.
started. As I recall, that I didn't take a chance to like go back and watch Part of Leap Home Part 2. I remember that Tom had been killed. I think somebody else had been killed in this particular attempted rescue mission. A couple other people got injured and they failed the mission, obviously. But that was it. But the way Magic talked about it, of course, we're taking like Magic's monologue at face value here. It almost sounded like he had been killed and almost the entire squad had been killed.
Right. Yeah. So the interesting thing is that when Al first pops in, he says that Tom is killed and two others are wounded.
Okay.
And but as the episode progresses, as things start to go haywire on the actual mission, I do think that there's one point where Al says, something like, now nobody makes it back, or something like that. So I think that at one point that later on in the episode, it is alluded that yes, maybe Magic will die / Sam will die if they don't
Sure.
do something differently. And that's, I think, when Sam decides to to realize that, okay, well, maybe we can't save the captives, but we can we can save everybody else.
Sure.
But by that time, Maggie, unfortunately, is dead.
Sure. I mean, and it's also a thing, like I can understand why they chose to not go down the waiting room path in this one, because like that would have totally derailed a very beautiful scene.
Absolutely.
Because like if you had explained like, well, back in the old project there was a waiting room because like sleeping worked differently back then, blah blah blah. Yeah, it would have just
But
become like an exposition fest. And
right. Well, and here's the thing, and this is something that we've talked about quite a few times before. Just because there's a waiting room, that's no reason to think that anyone who has ever been in the waiting room is going to remember their time in the waiting room. And I mean, given the circumstances, given the what we know about these people going back to their own lives, it definitely seems as though most of them kind of forget their time in the waiting room to begin with.
sure.
So I'm not I'm not taking Magic's monologue as retconning anything until we get like further confirmation. I can completely understand how some people might think that this is retconning, certain elements of the original Leap from Leap Home Part 2 and retconning the waiting room, or maybe alluding to that fact. I totally get that. I'm not, I don't think it infers that. I just, yeah, I think, to me, this is what's much more important to get from this, of course, is that Magic knows that, that Sam had leaped into him at some point, and that, and that he considers it his job to figure out how this all works and where Sam is, and, wants some answers beyond all of that. Uh uh and I think it's really lovely. And I feel like we could spend most of our episodes sometimes talking about Mason Alexander Park, and that's not to say that, everyone is doing fantastic work. I mean, I could spend an episode just talking about Raymond Lee, but Mason has created such interesting, distinct relationships. And yes, part of it's in the writing, but they have done such an incredible job of creating these distinct relationships with each and every character, and just the way that they treat Jen, the way that they treat Magic, the way that they treat Addison, like, it's different. And not only that, the one thing that I feel like we don't get to talk enough about, and I think we'll have more opportunities to do down the road, is it's clear that Ian, I want to be careful how I say this because I don't want people to misinterpret it, but Ian loves Ben. Like,
Yes.
Ian is just as invested in getting Ben back home as anybody else. And so I think it's just really lovely, the scene, that the writers chose Ian as the character to receive this information from Magic, because really it's for us, it's for the audience. The whole damn thing is for the audience, right? But they could have had Magic sit down with Jen, they could have had Magic sit down with Addison, but they chose to have Magic sit down with Ian, and I think that was the perfect choice for so many reasons.
I find that interesting because, just as you said, that is that Al in the original series, like, he was very much like our conduit.
Yeah.
To understand things. And I feel like that's what they're doing with Ian a little bit.
Yeah. I mean,
especially in this case.
Addison might be the hologram, but I think Ian checks more Al boxes than any other character on the show.
I know.
Did you just see the suit?
Yeah, I know. Yeah. And we'll talk about that a little bit on, because we got some reader feedback about that, but I will save it for that. That's not to take away from anything that Caitlin Bassett is doing, because, again, I think she's doing wonderful stuff. But now, like, what she's been doing, it's all been upended because of what happens in the last scene and Ben remembering, which, by the way, I thought was wonderful. We get to the end, and I love another Quantum Leap staple. I want to know if they actually did this on purpose or not. We know that everything turns out okay because Jake and Eva have lots of kids.
Yeah. Which now is Ben starting to be responsible for children being born that would not have originally been born?
Here we go.
And those children would be like, our age, basically, maybe a little bit younger in time for the new series. So who knows? Maybe we'll see some of those kids walking around the project.
But in between, anyway, all of the moments that happened in between, like the personal moments with the dad, were really great.
Oh yeah, gosh, we didn't even get to talk about him.
Like, the answer is always in front of you, and Ben running out and then stepping back in. Oh, can I borrow the car? That moment. It seemed like just like a wonderful 80s movie moment for some reason. And the music, like, throughout this episode was fantastic. Yeah,
they've been doing a wonderful job.
Should note that Don't You Want Me Baby came out 4 months after this leap took place, but that's another staple of the original series. Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, but yeah, I love the end.
Yes,
with how Ben remembers, and, like, thinking about it earlier today, even the fact that he says, you're the woman I love, that directly repeats what Sam says to Donna. And again, it's a very straightforward, maybe even a little bit of a cliche line. So I don't know if it was an intentional thing, but it is exactly what Sam says to Donna in a leap back.
Yeah. We have been fortunate enough to to talk to a couple of people off the record, and in learning more about this specific scene, simplicity was part of the goal.
Mm,
And I think that they nailed it.
yeah.
I was moved by the moment. I rewatched it. Like, I literally, once the episode was over, I rewound it and watched this specific moment
Mm,
again, because it's we've gotten a lot of stuff that we never would have gotten in the classic series already, right? But this is something that I feel like really pushes us to a whole new level,
mm.
with the relationship between Ben and Addison, which has continued to develop in all of these wonderful ways. And yeah, Ben remembering, and Addison's reaction to it, and the attempted handhold. I mean, it was just beautiful. And
Mhm.
the wonderful thing is, and the reason why I kind of inferred that this was going to happen in this episode, is that the publicity photos that were originally released show photos from this scene, but the way that they do it, they show Ben, and then there's another photo, and it's just Addison. So you don't actually see the two of them together, even in the publicity photos. And that, to me, was just really lovely, because in the
No, you
in
do.
the
No, you do. You
well,
see him in
there's
bed.
there's there,
You see him in bed together.
yes, no, 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 no. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking
Oh,
about
okay.
from this specific scene where they're
Oh,
trying to hold each
I
other's
got you. I
hand.
got you. I got
If
you.
you
I
go,
got you.
if you yeah,
Sure.
if you go and you look at the hand holding scene, the production photos that were released, there's a photo of Ben holding out his hand, and then there's a photo separately of Addison holding out her hand, and you don't
Got you.
actually see them together in that moment in the
Sure.
publicity photos even. And so it was really just beautiful to actually see the moment, to see it in action, to see the hand going through. But yes, the photo of them in bed together, that's the one where I texted you and I was like, we get a flashback,
That's right.
because
That's right.
it
Okay.
was
Yeah.
so, yeah. But I thought it was just lovely. I thought it avoided any sort of corny cliche. It was just, it was honest. It was nice. I thought it was great, and I'm glad that it happened now, that they didn't wait 8 more weeks or whatever. It's like, we're off to the races, man. I mean, that's just what it feels
Hmm.
like with this show, and I cannot wait to see what happens with Ben in the Old West.
I can't. Yeah. With like what they're doing, what their new dynamic is going to be, and yeah,
Right.
this great, wonderful. Like we've spent more time with the teaser leap than we have so far. The moment out, like what we're going to see, it
Oh yeah,
it's
that's a
really
good point.
interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and this is obviously the oldest person that Ben has leapt into thus far,
Hmm.
which will be interesting to see how that all relates, and how he handles, this situation, physically speaking, because, knowing that he's got the physical attributes of who he's leapt into, like, that'll be kind of interesting to think about. We got kind of the tease and the comedic moment in this episode about the fact that, what are you missing, Ben? But
Yeah.
in this
Yeah.
case, like, he's gone from being a boxer to a woman, to now being an older person, especially an older person in the 1880s, which, let's face it, was not necessarily kind to human beings physically. It was not a kind time period or place.
Sure.
So it'll be interesting to see how that affects him. Um, yeah, I'm really curious to see what the reaction is like at the project too, knowing that Ian, was kind of excited to begin with when they found out about the fact that, hey, Ben's leaping outside of his lifetime. Now
Sure.
Ben's back in the Old West. So yeah,
It's interesting.
onward.
Onward. So speaking of, as a way of a segue here, we got a listener message this last week that kind of asked questions about that. Let me pull it up here. This is from Christian Agers. Thank you, Christian, for the message. And again, apologies that we didn't have the email address up in the show notes like we always said that we do. I'm going to kind of like trim this down just for the sake of things, but he had some issues with Ben leaping outside of his own lifetime. And the
Sure.
fact that Ian or anybody at the project, they don't address string theory, like leaping
Right.
outside to like your own string or whatever. They say, Ian says like all of the safety protocols are off now. And Christian's response is that the string theory of quantum leap is the bedrock upon which the series is built. It's why it works. It is the very first thing we learn about the project, and it's so seminal that in fact that Sam is shown explaining it to Donna in a foreshadowing of their relationship. The whole point is that the ends at the birth and death represent the timeline in which you can jump or leaping along DNA as they did in the Civil War episode. And you can jump between points because you make a circle and ball it up and all the points touch, but only within the circle bound by life and death. So how do removing the safeguards change this? This wasn't a project rule. It was the physics of time travel in this universe.
Or was it? The reason why I say that is because, if you look at Mirror Image in particular, I think that episode was setting the stage to just bust things wide open as far as when Sam could go and where Sam could go. I mean, we know for fact that they were planning on doing stuff in the future in the following season. That a scene had actually been written that involved Al in the future looking for Sam. I think that getting tied to what Sam's theory was, regardless of whether or not Steinman had a similar theory, regardless of whether or not, what was the doctor's name that he went off into the cat,
Lenegro?
Professor Lenegro. Yeah. Like regardless of other people maybe having similar ideas, this was Sam's way in, right? Sam's way in to time travel was the string theory, and that's the thing, it's a theory. So to just just because that was the rule for the old show, which again, the rule that they broke, and then a rule that they were planning on kind of like finding other ways around anyway, I think Mirror Image provides us with the idea and the notion that Sam might be controlling his leaps. Sam might have used this theory to help build the accelerator, but I don't believe for an instant that this theory needs to be held as gospel. I love the theory. I love the conceit in the original series. I love the fact that that was what we saw. I think doing away with it and explaining it as being a safety protocol in the new project is actually kind of cool. And I hope that we get more about it. And if we don't, then I think it's a legitimate criticism to say, you just did away with it because you didn't want to have to deal with it anymore, talk about it anymore. I think that it should be discussed. I think that maybe we should get something. But again, I think that one of the things that this show, I hope, is teaching people is just hang on, just wait and see. Like, you're not going to get everything all at once, and it's not always going to be spoon fed to you. But if the show has taught us anything 4 episodes in, it's that we're going to get some great stuff. We just have to kind of hang on for it. So I don't agree that the string theory is the actual physics of time travel in this universe. I don't agree with that notion at all.
Well, I can agree with Christian in that that's kind of what they presented because they made such a big deal about it. Like, I can agree with you. Like, I'm glad I can accept that they're going to blow the doors off of this and they can have Ben time travel wherever. I think it was worth a little bit more of a discussion just beyond like safety protocols. Even just a couple of lines of just saying, well, Ben was working on new code for the last 6 months. Obviously, he figured something else out.
Yeah.
For leaping beyond. Christian also
or maybe one of the things about string theory is that we don't quite understand or grasp yet as an audience is maybe it was a safeguard. Maybe the idea is that, like, to successfully travel through time, and do it in a safe manner, you have to use your birth and your death as kind of the loop in which you time travel, and that somewhere in the past 30 years they've been able to say, like, well, that's a good idea to hang on to, but we don't actually need it. And maybe that's what Ben and Janice were able to kind of been like, we don't actually need to do it this way.
Yeah. But now we have the budget to make things look better. So yeah. So there's that. To loop back to what we were saying about the differences between Addison and Ian. This is Christian's letter. Also, I love Addison, but my wife thinks that Ian should have been the observer, maybe serving as a better blend between what she, as in my wife, considers to be boring Addison and flamboyant Al. Do you think or know if we might see Ian as the observer in the future for just this reason? I don't think that they're ever going to switch Ian out for Addison because of Ian being more exciting or Caitlin being boring. Because, like I said, I think Caitlin is doing fantastic in the role. I do think, to open the question up more broadly, I don't think there is any special connection, like neurological connection between Ben and Addison, and it all revolves around them. I think at any point, anybody else could step into the imaging chamber and communicate with Ben. And I think that because they are so clearly able, they like through monitors, they can see into the imaging chamber. They can see what Addison is seeing. They see Ben as Ben. If you take what we saw on the monitor in Atlantis at face value. So I think I hadn't really thought about this, but I think Addison has the job of the hologram now because her job's been taken. Everybody else still has a job at Project Quantum Leap.
Sure.
Addison doesn't have a job anymore because Ben took it. So who else is going to be the hologram?
Right.
Ian's too busy writing code.
Yeah.
That is to say, I don't think it's going to happen in the first season, or maybe it'll happen later in the first season. Maybe there is some point where Addison is deposed somewhere else and somebody else, maybe Ian, they do have to step into the imaging chamber.
I mean, I think that there is a I think that there is a 100% chance that Ben will interact with another person as a hologram on his leaps. And I'll leave it at that.
It's very possible. We shall, that brings up the question. The last time we saw Janice, she was building a thing
in there.
Is a question like, is it an accelerator or is it an imaging chamber? I think it's an imaging chamber.
I think it's an imaging chamber too.
And also, speaking of Janice, I would be surprised if we see her again in the next couple episodes. I think the next couple episodes, it's going to be more leap centric. They'll probably give her some lines, like they did, like at the project, like what is Janice up to right now?
If we don't,
like I said, we'll
do see her before the month is over. I'll say I think we'll see her before the month is over.
Sure, but
I don't think we're going to see her next week, and I think there's a good chance that we won't see her the next week after that, though.
Probably, because I don't see. I mean, after you drug your mom, you don't go back for tea again. No. So I don't think we're going to see her in that context again. We know she's hacking away, so unless they're going to have scenes of her like sitting in a computer trying to hack away, I don't think we're going to see Janice again until we find out what she's doing with that hand link.
I think you're right, and I think it's actually really smart in a way because the character is intriguing, and you almost want to cool off that intrigue just a little bit while we deal with some of the other stuff, especially the things that we're dealing with over the course of this episode. Ben's realization that he's engaged to Addison, Magic's monologue to Ian. Clearly that stuff takes precedence, and I feel like it would have distracted if we would have gone and spent any time with Janice in this episode. I think that maybe we'll see her next week in the Western episode. Maybe we'll see her in the Earthquake episode. Maybe that's where the bulk of the reshoots go, is maybe they just do some stuff with Janice, to fill time, so that they don't have to fill it with other stuff, And
again, not to beat a dead horse, but like I am so interested in seeing the Earthquake episode, but I'm also scared to see the Earthquake episode.
I mean, I feel the same way, and I am still like, we have not gotten. There has been no official confirmation that it is actually going to be episode 6. It's Martin Garrow never actually said it would be. He said, I think he even said like maybe somewhere in there. There's been no official confirmation, official word that is actually the 6th episode. So we'll see. I think it probably will be. I think that it seems to be that's that's kind of the general assumption right now. But knowing that 6 additional episodes, for instance, instead of 9. We all thought it was going to be 9. That's what had kind of been out there. But
that's what Ernie put out there. So
right. So but who knows? Ernie might not have known. You know what I mean? Sure. So I think that I think that we'll see it. It'll be really interesting to see what they do with it. And the leap itself, I think, is strong. It'll be very interesting though to see how it all works, considering the relationship between Ben and Addison, and what was revealed at the end of this episode. Maybe they reshot a ton of it. Maybe they just reshot like damn near the whole thing. Who knows? They've had time.
I don't know. And again, we have a very different hand link that we've seen from the promo photos. Right. That's just going to be a little thing of just like they don't explain it. Or
what if at the very beginning of the episode, Addison walks up to Ian and is like, Ian, I can't get this thing to work. And he's like, oh, here, take this one instead. Bam, problem solved.
Bam, there we go. I don't know. We'll see. But Christian, one more comment from his letter that he sent. Like, finally, I really like to appreciate your view on why there can be no waiting room in the no series. But at some point, I hope they explain what happens to the consciousness of the person that Ben leaps into. Because what a torturous hell would it be to like be trapped behind like Ben's eyes, but like have no agency. And also, where is Ben's body? So again, I feel like Alison Pregler, she has posted this on Twitter. Like this just needs to be like its own thing. It needs to be in our header thing on Twitter and Facebook, because this is the question that everybody asked. From the interview that Stephen Lillian gave back a couple of months ago, the idea is that both the Leapy's body and Ben's body both are there at the same time. Mentally, they both are there at the same time. Mentally, the Leapy is suppressed, and physically, they're entangled in some way.
And like I said, superimposition, I believe, is actually the term.
Superposition in some way. Yeah. So right now, we've seen Ben benefit from being in a stronger body, like in the boxing episode. Like I said, I'm interested to see at some point down the road, like after the viewers have gotten used to this, I'm interested to see if Ben leaps into a physically weaker person, is he ever going to be inhibited by what?
I mean, I think who knows? That could be something that we get from the very next episode when he's in the older body.
Yeah,
it'll be interesting to see if that has any effects. Yeah, I agree. I think Christian raises a really great point. Is it will be interesting to explore what that's like. Is it kind of akin to what Magic described, only without a waiting room? Like, is that kind of what we're supposed to, as viewers, take it? Is that, that in this case, Eva felt a little nudge, that Ben stepped in, that she's there, but she can't really, like, she's not able to remember anything about what happens, and then she kind of comes to 24 hours later and she's like, man, that was kind of weird. I kind of remember what was happening, but I don't really remember what happened, but you know what I mean? Like, it's interesting too, because I mean, let's face it, like, I'm sorry. There's one beautiful thing that we didn't talk about in this episode that I absolutely loved. Ben not answering for the proposal.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, because the thing is, we've talked about it with the classic series before about how Sam has these moments or does these things that really the Leapy should have gotten to experience for themselves. And the fact that Ben basically like leaves it for Eva to be Ben's song is awesome. That's all I have to say. Like, I just thought that was lovely.
Yeah.
And yes, it created all this dramatic tension too, but like,
there's not even a discussion about it. Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Like, yes, this is obviously the right thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Ben's great.
Yeah. But we totally glossed over that. You're right.
But no, I think Christian raises a really, really great point, and I do hope that we at one point get maybe a little bit more, and maybe we won't. Maybe Magic's description is enough. Maybe that's what the viewer or what the writers and producers want us to know, that this is what leaping is like. This is what the person that gets leapt into feels like. Don't worry. We're not, we're not creating any sort of time travel assault here.
Yeah. For sure. Now that I think about the one thing I would have loved to have seen out of this episode, and maybe they would have done it if they'd done it later. But since you had this beautiful monologue with Magic explaining what that nudge felt like, if they had actually showed it on the sleep with Eva, start the episode off with Eva sitting at the bar.
Right.
And Ben coming in, and the episode
kind of like
end the episode with Eva coming back in Union Station and just being like, what the hell just happened?
Right.
But that's not what we got. But anyway, I am hoping as the series goes on is that they are willing to take more chances like that. And like I've said before, give us a little bit more of the Leapy. Give us moments like that.
Yeah. Me too. I think they will. I think that they will explore it. I don't doubt that for a second. But I think right now, to be completely honest, I think it's too early. I really do. I actually think it's too early for them to dive into some of that stuff. And I think that a time will come soon enough that they will be able to have the freedom to really go into some of those things. But
Mhm,
right now, I just love the way that they've paced things out. I
mhm.
really am. I'm enjoying the reveals that we're getting when we're getting them, how they're building this story. I think that the last two episodes, especially, and even Atlantis, like I don't want to, I don't, I don't want to crap on Atlantis by any means. I think the leaps have been good. Yeah, I just think that the show has been great and is very deserving of its additional episode order. And I hope that we're here talking about it for a long time to come, because I'm enjoying it.
Yeah,
Even if we didn't do that, that's the thing. It's like, even if we didn't do this podcast, I would be enjoying this. I would be sitting down and
yeah.
watching it every Monday night and just be like, man, Quantum Leap's back on. I got to find a podcast with two middle-aged assholes that talk a lot. Yeah.
There you go. Exactly. And the thing is, going back and watching the first episode and the first part of Atlantis yesterday with my family, like taking the pressure away, sitting around people who aren't nerds, sitting around
Right.
people who have a life. My youngest sister's boyfriend, he loved Quantum Leap. He loved the old Quantum Leap. Did not even realize that there was a new show.
Yeah.
Because he has a life.
Right. No, I know. I've heard it from a few people, social media, other. Oh, I didn't even know that there was a new one. Which on one hand, you're just sort of like, oh, did they market it well enough? And then on the other hand, you're like, yes, they marketed it well enough. Look at all the cool stuff that they did. It's
They
just
do a lot
that,
of great
yeah,
things.
there's
I
so
mean, they can
much.
market it. They can market it great, but I have a feeling he's not on social media all that much. And he doesn't watch a lot of TV. Or if he does watch TV, like he's going in like specifically to watch a specific thing. Like he's not like flipping channels. So
Right.
if that's the case, there you go. But my point being is, take away all the pressure of the first two episodes, whatever. Just go back and watch the first two episodes now. If you thought they were bad, they're not as bad as you think.
No, I agree.
They're pretty good.
I would totally agree with that. Still not a huge fan of the leap in the premiere episode, but that's all right.
I got you. I got you.
One other thing, Christian, first of all, thank you so much for your letter. Really appreciate it, and thank you for joining us and being part of this whole ride. One thing I didn't say earlier, when it comes to Ian as the observer, like, make no mistake, I would love to see Ian interact with Ben on a leap. Like, I think that would be awesome. Sure. I think they would, it would be a lot of fun. But that said, like, much like what you said, Dennis, I mean, I love Addison. I love the fact that their relationship is important, to the very fabric kind of these leaps, and the way that, one thing that we're not giving Addison, the character, enough credit for, I mean, Caitlin, the actor, as well, but the character specifically, is that Addison is the only character that is bridging the gap between the leaps and the present day. And so when we see her in the present day, it's lovely, because we're getting to see something that we rarely, if ever, got to see from Al, which is that walking out of the imaging chamber and just being like, in the midst of a leap. And the stakes in some ways are even higher, because, like, I would argue that the nature of Sam and Al's relationship is easily on par with the nature of Ben and Addison's relationship. But at the end of the day, Ben and Addison are engaged to be married. One could argue that the highest stakes of the original series were getting Al and Beth together, right? I mean, that's the last thing Sam does that we see him do. So I think in that notion, it's like the nature of relationships. I mean, I don't know. I'm just really enjoying the fact that she's kind of the vessel to take the present back to the past for Ben, and also to take Ben's experience back into the present day and interact with everyone there and advocate for, that's the other interesting thing about Addison as a character. She's having to advocate for Ben while he's on the leap. She's having to advocate for their relationship. She's having to advocate for, there's so much stuff going on. Oh my gosh, I almost forgot one other thing. This is a wild tangent. We got to get out of here, but I will say one other thing that was fascinating to me is we got mention of Tom Beckett in this episode. And we also got a little clue, a little nugget dropped to us about a nosy senator who comes to pop into the project. And knowing that the writing staff has done stuff in the past that has basically been taken from fan works, the name Janice, for instance, I would not be a bit surprised. I'm not saying it's going to be, but I would not be a bit surprised if that senator, if not Tom, is not somebody related in some fashion to somebody we've seen before.
I know. Yeah. Somebody threw out Diane McBride.
I don't think it's gonna be Diane.
That's they had her so old and decrepit.
I was gonna say
in
she would be
in 1995. She would have to be very old, and she
yeah.
was already not
She'd be like
aging very
90.
well.
She'd be like 90. She'd be like 90 years old.
Sure.
Not that we don't have a problem in this country with electing officials who are far too old for the job, but that's besides the
But
point.
that's beside the point. But I'm interested to see who this is. Like if they, like you said, if they're able to tie it back in to the original series.
I think we got to see Tom at some point. I do.
We'll find out. But for now, we should leap out of here, get back to our family responsibilities. And yeah. And next week, do we have a name for next week's episode?
Back to the Future Part 3. No.
Back to the it does look,
I say that with love, by the way. That is not, I'm not throwing shade in any way.
I think Salvation or Bust.
Yeah, I think you're right.
That's what Matt had on.
We haven't gotten promo photos for it yet, which is a little strange. Usually we get the promo photos by now.
Well, usually they drop them like right after in the middle of like the actual episode airing.
Yeah, but they dropped some of the decent proposal ones early, remember?
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Anyway,
we'll see. Yeah, we hopefully we'll have some to share with you within the next day or two, and then obviously you'll know when we get our screener, because we'll probably be all abuzz about it on the internet.
Yeah.
Again, we're so grateful for the fact that we get those, because it gives us the opportunity to make sure we can release an episode, in a very timely fashion for everyone immediately after the episode airs, so that our listeners can check it out. So yeah, we'll be back next week with that. In the meantime, take care of yourselves, take care of one another, and remember to leap responsibly.
All right. We'll see you next week, y'all.